This is a true story that happened in Legos. When Deborah, the maid, first arrived to Bola's home, everyone felt she was an angel. Everything she did was flawless, never made a mistake. But they had no notion she was far from an angel. One morning, Bola entered into the baby's room and froze. Becky was sitting there playing with her 6-month-old kid, but she was not human. Horns, a tail, a limb that resembles a beast, and bright red eyes that are looking at her. What occurred next was beyond terrible. Turn on the notification bell to be the first to view this incredible real-life tale. Keep watching to the very end. Bola, the CEO of Luminatech Solutions, had everything most people dreamt of: a prosperous company, a loving spouse, and 4 lovely children, 2 boys and 2 girls. But juggling both job and home was a regular challenge. Her mornings were busy, nights frantic, and yet Bola always kept a flawless grin for her colleagues and family. She felt she could manage everything until the weight of obligations became too great. Bola recognized she needed assistance one day after missing a crucial board meeting due to a spilled breakfast and a wailing baby. The domestic tasks were burdensome, and her children wanted attention she didn't always have. That's when Becky showed up, a youthful, elegant, and apparently flawless maid. She was highly recommended and came with wonderful recommendations. At first sight, Becky appeared like a godsend from heaven. Becky never made errors. Every place she entered gleamed. Meals were wonderfully prepared, and the children loved her instantly. Bola and her husband frequently noted that she was too wonderful to be true. Becky gradually gained indispensability. She took care of the kids, the home, and even anticipated Bola's needs before she could ask. She seemed almost heavenly to the family, a miracle that made life easy. Bola was pleased to be able to breathe at last. The responsibilities of her CEO life and parenthood felt reasonable, and she could concentrate on creating Luminatech solutions without worrying about household disruption. But much as Becky appeared ideal, there were small abnormalities. Occasionally, Bola would see her out of the corner of her eye, grinning in an unnerving manner while gazing at the kids for a little too long. The children, however, liked her without hesitation. Every time Becky played with the twins, they would chuckle. The elder kids happily assisted her with household tasks. No one else appeared to notice the weird vibe she carried. Bola never forgot her religion in spite of her hectic schedule. She was a born-again Christian, committed to God, and prayer was the core of her existence. After putting the kids to bed each night, she would kneel in her room and fervently pray for her family, begging God to keep them safe from any evil. Bola would pray over her children, proclaiming the blood of Jesus over them, asking for supernatural protection, wisdom, and favor in every aspect of their life. No matter how ideal life seemed, she felt that only God could protect her family from invisible threats. Her religion provided her strength to handle the turmoil of parenting and the obligations of operating Luminatech Solutions. She consistently and powerfully prayed. Bola made it a point never to miss a night, thinking that the spiritual barrier she called over her house kept her children safe from danger. Yet, even in her pious existence, she realized that Becky's presence held a unique energy, one she couldn't understand. At first, Bola brushed it off, believing that her fatigue was causing her to overthink. In contrast, Becky seemed untouched by Bola's spiritual presence. Becky often walked about the house in silence as Bola prayed, her face calm, and sometimes her eyes strangely calculating. Bola diligently carried out her evening routines, praying over her kids, their toys, the bedrooms, and even the kitchen, requesting protection from any harm that could befall them. The family remained unconscious of the minor signs Bola detected, believing Becky totally. Impressed with Becky's productivity, even Bola's husband urged her to relax and let the maid take care of everything. But deep down, Bola's intuition told that things was not as wonderful as it looked. She couldn't get rid of the impression that Becky's real personality was concealed behind an impeccable exterior. Becky was left alone with the youngest child, a lovely 6-month-old baby girl called Amara, when Bola left the home to drop the other 3 kids off at school. Becky's attitude shifted as soon as the door clicked shut behind Bola. Her actual form became visible as her innocent, heavenly aspect vanished. A witch with sharp horns, a beast-like limb, and a long, sinuous tail. Her eyes blazed crimson in the faint morning light, and a terrifying grin spread over her face. She went quickly, silently, and with inhuman precision throughout the home. Becky started completing the domestic tasks, but not as a person. The way she worked was unearthly, her limbs moving abnormally, her power and speed well above that of a typical maid. Her abilities appeared to draw people to her as she walked. Shadowy beings, members of her secret realm who appeared like warped versions of people, began coming from the corners of the home. Enjoying the quantity of food and the home under her control, they started to feast in the kitchen, laughing and murmuring in unsettling tones. Each mouthful they took seemed to sap the warmth from the room, leaving a cold, malevolent force behind. Becky, in her witch form, softly rocked infant Amara while keeping a wary eye on her unusual guests. The infant grinned sweetly, ignorant of the danger around her, making the sight both scary and bizarre. The mysterious members did whatever Becky asked them to do around the home. Even the walls appeared to murmur secrets only Becky could decipher, and the air felt thick with force. For Becky, this was her actual existence, a secret place she could explore any time people were gone. Her ability to mix so seamlessly with Bola's family when necessary counterbalanced the world of feasting, gloom, and submission. By the time Bola arrived home, the house was pristine, and Becky was back in her heavenly form, smiling and humming as if nothing had occurred. The ominous force dissipated like a shadow before dawn, leaving no trace save for a slight chill going down Bola's spine. She dressed beautifully and set out to pick up Bola's 3 oldest children from school. No one would ever guess the truth. While this was going on, Bola observed something strange about Becky that she was unable to fully express. At night, when she noticed the maid sleeping, Becky's postures were peculiar. She would sometimes recline with her legs up against the wall. At other moments, Bola looked to be sleeping, her eyes wide open as she stared into the darkness. The image sent little chills down Bola's spine, but she attempted to dismiss it as merely a quirky habit. Nothing in the home was ever missing. No jewelry, cash, or even the smallest object was ever lost. Bola likened this to the tales she had heard from friends who were always complaining about their maids robbing them. In Bola's eyes, Becky was ideal. She could not only manage the home brilliantly, but also take care of the children with love and patience. Bola frequently praised God for giving her with such a trustworthy maid. Her husband, who was pleased by Becky's productivity and the tranquility she maintained in the home, also complimented her job. Bola relaxed, fully trusting Becky. Yet, deep down, Bola couldn't escape the slight anxiety she felt whenever she watched Becky at night, laying in those odd postures or looking blankly into the darkness. Something about it hinted that everything was not as it appeared. It was nothing, she told herself. After all, everything went well under Becky's supervision. The kids were content and the home was secure. Why worry over a few unusual sleeping habits? Life continued as usual. Bola focuses on expanding Luminatech solutions. Under Becky's guidance, her kids flourished, and the home seemed to function flawlessly. However, the little clues that Bola had seen would soon start to add together, resulting in a horrifying finding that nobody could have predicted. Perhaps the ideal maid wasn't as heavenly as she seemed. Charles, Bola's spouse, has always shown her love and support, but gradually he started to develop an unexplainable affinity to Becky, the apparently ideal maid. It occurred one tranquil night. Becky went to get a drink of water in the kitchen. Charles, arriving from work late, spotted her in the dark light and couldn't take his eyes off her. Something about Becky intrigued him, a magnetic presence he couldn't understand. Charles was drawn to her despite her angelic exterior, which concealed a perilous charm. Charles stretched out and grasped Becky's hand before he knew it. The moment ignited something none of them could control, and the air around them felt electrified, almost electric. That night, Becky and Charles found themselves alone in her room. Subtle at first, their connection became stronger, and they secretly made love beneath the same roof, out of Bola's sight. Meanwhile, Bola was ignorant of the spectacle occurring in her own house. She was totally unaware of the perilous temptation that lurked in her home, believing Charles was sleeping in their bed. A slight indication of Becky's real nature might be seen in the faint red glow in her eyes in the dark. Though Charles was utterly ignorant, her otherworldly presence made the night seductive, putting him under her spell. Bola saw nothing out of the ordinary the next morning. There was a little strain in the air, but Becky was grinning and taking care of the kids, while Charles pretended nothing had occurred. Bola's faith remained strong, but she could not yet perceive the gloom that had crept into her household. In addition to being a witch, the ideal maid was also a seductress who quietly exerted control over the household. The home, despite seeming immaculate on the exterior, concealed a secret no one could have anticipated. Bola felt a little stirring in her intuition. a hint of discomfort that she was yet unable to completely comprehend. Once everyone had left the home for the day, Becky changed back into her real self and called forth the dark spirits that obeyed her orders. The home was flooded with a strange, unearthly radiance. The ghosts started gorging themselves on the meal Becky had cooked earlier, and their chuckles reverberated through the deserted hallways, sending shivers down everyone's spine. A towering, commanding figure, Becky's spirit husband, rose out of the shadows. His eyes flared with wrath as he examined her. With a scream that shook the walls, he asked, "Why did you give your body to this man? Your mission was clear. You were assigned to destroy this family, and now you are falling in love with him." Becky's visage flickered with a trace of shame, but her red flashing eyes remained ferocious. "I am completing my task," she muttered. Her spirit spouse became more enraged, saying, "But he is different. Different or not, your mission was to cause mayhem. Your objective is weakened if you let him sleep with you. Your mission is being betrayed." The other shadowy members mumbled in agreement. They paused their meal to look at Becky and see whether she would comply or give in to her human feelings. Becky clenched her fists, feeling the tug between her duty as a witch and the weird emotion forming for Charles. A portion of her heart that she had long believed to be dormant awoke with turmoil. Her spirit spouse growled, "You can't allow emotions to get in the way. Destroy them like you were instructed to. You have been strong, but now your weakness might shatter everything." Becky's thoughts were racing as the ghosts carried on with their unsettling feast. She had to decide whether she would fulfill her dark mission or surrender to the forbidden emotions she was forming for Charles, the guy she was intended to exploit as a tool. Suddenly, Charles's call came in. His rich voice entered Becky's chamber. "Dear darling child, I'm going home right now. Prepare yourselves for me." Becky froze at the sound of his voice. Her spirit husband's admonition resonated in her head. "Do not give in. You're falling in love. Everything will be ruined by this." But before Becky could reply, the evil spirits that had surrounded her disappeared into the shadows, leaving her to deal with her contradictory feelings on her own. Charles showed up to the residence shortly after. The room was thrilled by his presence, and he brought everyone closer together right away. With hunger in his eyes, Charles embraced Becky. He planted a powerful kiss on her before either of them could think, and Becky let herself get carried away. Their desire immediately intensified. The witch that Becky really was hidden by her human guise. While Charles was utterly oblivious of the evil hiding inside her, they made love in secret. A time full with peril and temptation. With the exception of their muttered whispers, the home was silent. After it was ended, Charles went to his office as if nothing had occurred, not realizing that he had simply been further caught in an invisible web. Soon later, Bola arrived home fatigued from the day's labor and errands. She wandered around the home, admiring how clean and flawless everything was, as if Becky had miraculously restored the order of the day. Bola never noticed anything weird that day. She continued to have entire faith in Becky, thankful to God for sending her such a wonderful maid, blissfully oblivious to the covert tempest that had just occurred in her own house. Bola's kids came running to her one morning, their cheeks pallid and trembling. "Mama, I had a dream," one of them said. Bola's heart skipped a beat as she said, "I saw a woman trying to drag me away." Her youngest kid was intuitively cuddled close to her, a gorgeous 6-month-old newborn boy called Elijah, and felt a wave of mother protectiveness. Kneeling down beside Elijah's cot, Bola rested her hand gently on him and started to pray loudly, calling on the blood of Jesus to shelter her children from all harm. Covering Elijah and the other kids, she prayed fiercely, telling any ghost or evil power to leave their house. Bola's voice was forceful, trusting in the power of God to defend her family. The children stared, comforted by their mother's faith, as Bola's prayers appeared to fill the room with a warm, soothing glow. Bola murmured to Elijah, "No one will harm you while I am here," and gently kissed his forehead. "God is our defense, and we shall be shielded by his blood." Despite her prayers, Bola couldn't avoid the unsettling sensation that the warning from her children was a premonition, a peek at the threat that was closer than anybody could have imagined. She looked at Becky, who was working calmly about the home, her face calm and innocent. Bola made an effort to ignore the worry that was beginning to seep into her thoughts. But deep down, Bola sensed the gloom surrounding her home becoming greater. Something about Becky, something lurking underneath her beautiful facade, had not yet exposed. Bola vowed to pray even more earnestly for Elijah and the other children, unwittingly preparing for a confrontation that would test her faith, bravery, and the very safety of her family. That night, as usual, Charles went to Becky's room. Their covert rendezvous had become a regular part of his routine, a temptation he could no longer refuse. The illicit desire that had been growing between them engulfed them as they made love. Becky's crimson flashing eyes were veiled under her human veneer, her actual power sitting dormant, waiting. Afterward, Charles returned to his room, unconscious that the night's deeds had sparked forces well beyond his comprehension. Chaos broke out the next morning. Charles awakened to agonizing agony and found he could not move his legs. He attempted to rise but was overcome with panic and fell to the ground, powerless. Frantically, Bola went to his side. "What's going on, Charles?" she cried, screaming for rescue as horror grabbed her heart. They quickly transported him to the hospital. Despite a comprehensive examination and every test possible, the doctors were unable to identify any physical reason. Everything seemed to be fine, but he was still immobile. The paralysis surprised the physicians. "There's nothing physically wrong with him," one of them muttered, shaking his head. "We'll need to run more tests. But his body shows no signs of stroke or injury." Bola's heart sank. The fear she had tried to push aside now gripped her completely. Something unnatural had touched her husband, something beyond medical explanation. Deep down, Bola feared Becky. The maid who had seemed perfect was now entwined with a dark power she had yet to fully understand. As Charles lay helpless in the hospital bed, Bola whispered prayers over him, tears streaming down her face. She knew that only God's intervention could save her husband from the dark forces at work. While Charles remained paralyzed in the hospital, Bola was left juggling her demanding role as CEO of Luminatech Solutions and the care of her children, barely finding time to breathe. Becky, ever the perfect maid appearance, quietly took full control of the household. She managed the children, the chores, and even Bola's schedule with unnerving precision. Bola, overwhelmed and exhausted, barely had time to see her children. She trusted Becky completely, grateful for her efficiency, yet unaware of the darkness lurking behind that perfect smile. Each day, Becky's control over the house and subtly over the family grew stronger. Her supernatural presence became more apparent to those with spiritual sensitivity. Though Bola remained largely unaware, even Elijah, the 6-month-old baby, seemed strangely drawn to Becky. Bola sometimes noticed subtle changes in the children's behavior, small signs that something was off. But she attributed them to stress and Charles's hospitalization. Night after night, Becky resumed her secret rituals once the house was empty. Shadowy spirits would appear and feasts of darkness would take place in the quiet of the home, invisible to Bola and the children. Bola's prayers over her family became more fervent than ever, calling on the blood of Jesus to shield her loved ones. Yet, the veil of darkness Becky brought into the house was growing, threatening to break through if left unchecked. Her faith gave her strength, but even she felt the weight of exhaustion and fear. Managing a crisis at work, a paralyzed husband, and the household was pushing her to the brink. Becky, aware of Bola's struggles, seemed almost to relish the control she wielded, all while maintaining her angelic facade. The perfect maid was anything but harmless, and so the stage was set for a terrifying confrontation. The moment when Bola's faith, courage, and prayers would be tested against the true power of the witch who had infiltrated her home. The family's safety and even their lives hung in the balance. One morning, Bola left for work as usual. Her mind was heavy. Charles was still in the hospital, and her workload had doubled. She barely had time to sleep, but she held on to prayer as her strength. When she got to the office, ready to present a major contract, she suddenly realized she had forgotten a very important document at home. Frustrated but rushed, she hurried back to the house. As she entered the compound, something felt off. The air was too still, the house too quiet, and then it came a strange sound, a sound no human should ever make. Deep growling, almost like a beast, chewing or breathing heavily. Ola froze. Her heart thumped painfully in her chest. She tiptoed inside, following the sound that seemed to echo from her baby Elijah's room. When she reached the doorstep, her hands trembled as she slowly pushed the door open just a little. What she saw nearly stopped her heart. Becky was sitting on the bed with Elijah, but she was no longer human. 2 sharp horns grew from her head. Her eyes glowed a terrifying blood red. A long tail moved behind her like a serpent. One of her legs had transformed into that of a beast. Bola screamed. "Jesus!" The power of the name burst into the room like fire. Instantly, Becky transformed back into her human form. Calm, clean, innocent-looking. But Bola had already seen the truth. The ideal maid was a monster. Tears filled Bola's eyes. "So, you're a witch?" she whispered, shaking from fear and anger. "Becky, what have I done to you? Why bring darkness into my home? Why my family?" Becky didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She didn't defend herself. Instead, she looked Bola straight in the eye and said coldly, "I was sent by the kingdom of darkness to destroy you." Becky's red, glowing eyes flickered as she confessed. "Bola, your prayers have hindered me from destroying you. I attempted to touch your children to harm them, but every night when you pray and put your hands on them, I see a ring of fire surrounding them. There is nothing I can do." She drew closer, her voice laced with both rage and dread. "I even attempted to contaminate your meals. Your prayers would cause it to spring out each time I put poison in it, leaving it unable to hurt you. Your trust made all I tried useless." Bola inhaled deeply, frightened, but resolute. "God kept us safe despite your darkness opposing my prayers the whole time." Becky's face became serious. "Yes, it is the reason the kingdom of evil sent me to cripple your spouse, ruin your family, and disperse your destiny. However, all I attempted to destroy was shielded by your faith, your hands on your children, and your midnight prayers." With tears running down her face, Bola held baby Elijah tightly to her bosom. "God has never left our side. He has kept my kids safe, and I pray to him every night for their safety." Becky growled, her tail swinging behind her. Bola stepped forward, her eyes blazing with bravery. "You are too strong, Bola. Your spirit burns me. I am powerless here because of you, the angels you call in your prayers. They chase me away every time I attempt anything. Becky, I am not frightened. You may be a witch, but God is bigger than you. My children, my family, they belong to him, not to darkness." Becky shivered furiously, unable to disguise the terror now seeping across her features. You are shielded by a force I cannot oppose. I was intended to kill you, but I cannot not hear, not while you plead." The room was filled with the warmth of faith as Bola prayed in hushed tones over Elijah and her other children. The shadows Becky had conjured, wavering and disappearing. With one last shudder, Becky's sparkling eyes faded and her horns and tails gradually withdrew, returning her to human form. Bola's nightly prayers had shattered her power. Bola rose erect, her faith stronger than ever, believing that no evil could win over the blood of Jesus and a mother's love. Becky's voice trembled as she confessed completely. She spoke in a tone that was both regretful and afraid. "I was able to kidnap your husband, Bola, because he could not contain his passion. He made love with me, and I gave him an illness. Husbands should take note of this. Sleeping with their housemaid is risky. Not all maids are human." Bola maintained her composure despite the combination of anguish and rage burning in her eyes. "You're done here, Becky. You've already inflicted enough suffering." Now, shaking and helpless, Becky dropped on her knees and started pleading with Bola for forgiveness. "Please take compassion on me. I was sent by the kingdom of evil, but I'm sorry for what I've done." Bola lifted her hands and whispered a prayer, asking on God's might to return Becky back to where she came from. Light permeated the chamber as the witch slowly left, leaving the home fully free of darkness. Charles was still alive but frail, so Bola went to the hospital to tell him. "Your ailment is done," she said. "God has healed you, and you have learned a very important lesson. Respect your family, protect your marriage, and never allow lust to lead you astray again." Charles, now fully repentant, embraced Bola, tears flowing down his cheeks. He understood the gravity of his mistake and the power of the spiritual forces that had been at work. The house returned to peace. Bola's children were safe. Elijah and the others thriving under their mother's loving care. But one thing remained true. Finding another maid like Becky, who was so obedient and skilled, proved almost impossible, and Bola realized the value of careful judgment in whom she trusted. From that day on, Bola strengthened her faith even more, teaching her children to pray, to respect God, and to recognize that not every person or situation is what it seems. The moral was clear: prayer, faith, and vigilance protect your family. Temptation and hidden evil can lurk even in those who seem perfect. But steadfast faith and obedience to God will overcome darkness. Bola never forgot the lesson she learned that year. That trust must be earned. Temptation has consequences, and prayer is a shield stronger than any force of evil. Her family thrived. Her faith deepened. And though she struggled to find another maid, she knew that God's protection was the greatest gift she could ever have.